Hey, this is Steampunk Stories in AmberStreet.com. The one thing I wanted to talk about is how everybody seems to have their blinders on, or maybe not necessarily blinders. I guess the best way to describe it would be filters, kind of like these crappy 3D glasses that basically everything looks monochromatic green. But basically the thing I want to talk about today is the economy and the way it's underplayed. We have the worst economy in 80 years. I repeat, because I'm going to stress this. We have the worst economy in 80 years. The only thing worse than our job economy today was the Great Depression. It's not as bad as the Great Depression, but it's not far off. And if we don't improve things soon, if we don't restore living wage jobs soon, it will get worse. It'll continue to get worse. And now we burden the poor of by 2014 they have to purchase private health insurance, which has no guarantee of providing coverage that you actually need. We really need a single payer system like every other Western country, like Canada, like Australia, like England, like Northern Europe. But of course, we won't do that because there's too many people making a ton of money off the suffering of others. We have the best health care in the world that nobody else can afford. But health care is only part of the issue. The biggest part of the problem is wages, if adjusted for inflation, have been going down for 40 years. And it continues to go down. But CEO pay and corporate profits have skyrocketed. And we seem to think that our economy can thrive on non-living wages. It can't. You could be full time and be still underemployed. What does that mean? It's like when you can't afford your basic living expenses, you can't afford to raise a family, and you're working full time and you're in poverty. You can't afford transportation, or if you get hurt, you're going to become homeless. That's a real problem, and they never talk about it in the news media. You only hear about it in like real news. If you ever go to therealnews.com, it's a really good independent news site. They talk about real issues. It's I've been to other countries like Australia and England, and I've seen a better social infrastructure. Of course, with a better welfare system in other countries and better social infrastructure, people are always going to take advantage of it. But there's no reason not to help people who actually need it. Just need to find a better way of weeding out people who are conmen. But let me take my glasses off. But I guess the thing I'm trying to say is like it used to be so much better in the United States. Like my grandfather's generation, he was a high school dropout. That's another excuse you hear. He's like, you need to go back to school, re-educate, re-educate, re-educate. Well, unless you're going to be a doctor, most people can't afford to go to law school or medical school because that's very expensive, even more expensive than other types of schooling. And so, unless you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor, and there's even a lot of unemployed lawyers right now, it's hard for that's not a practical option. But like I was saying about my grandfather, was that he was a high school dropout, and he worked for Gulf Power, division of Southern Company. He retired in 1984, and he got over $3,000 a month pension and $1,500 a month Social Security. He had a comfortable retirement, middle class retirement. That would be a dream today. Pensions have disappeared in favor of 401ks. And everybody I know that's got a 401k, I have a friend who worked at Computer CGI and has a 401k, and he's had it for 10 years and it's only worth 50% of what he put into it. 401ks, in my opinion, are a scam, and they went to that when they started privatizing pensions, where they made it where it was no longer employee owned. Back in the 80s, under Reagan, this was done. They made it where pensions were no longer employee owned, but companies could borrow against it, and if a company went belly up, then the pension was gone. It used to be, even when a company went out of business, the pension was employee owned, so the pension would still stay there. you wouldn't be able to draw into it till 65, but you were still guaranteed a retirement. But I'd hate to see like 20 years from now, it's just going to get worse. You're going to have a lot more people retiring, and they're not going to have any savings. And then the problem is they're going to be too elderly, they're going to be too feeble to work, and it's just going to get worse. And underemployment is what continues this recession. I know officially we're out of it, but if you look at the so-called recovery, the majority of the recovery is in the top 1% of income bracket. The other people, like the top, other than the top 1%, people's income either stayed stagnant or declined. And where I come from in Pensacola, Florida, you see a lot of people working 3 jobs and only making $1,000 a month, and they barely exist. They ride to work in a bicycle, and they better not break a leg, because that's just all it'll take for them to become homeless. And we don't really help our homeless. Uh, we have a really big chronic homeless problem in a lot of urban areas. Like Pensacola is about 10,000. It's estimated. You can never have an exact figure because it's hard to locate every homeless person. And then I think in Los Angeles right now it's about 50,000. And the federal government estimates between 200 and 500,000, but I would say that the homeless issue is much larger than that. And you could say that they're all bums, but that's not the case. A lot of it is mentally ill. Again, under Reagan in the 80s, we defunded federal funding. We did away with federal funding for state mental institutions. So the majority of your mentally ill, unless they're criminally mentally ill, unless they're guilty of a heinous crime or something, they don't get the help they need. They just end out on the streets. And that's not good for social infrastructure. We need to stop the politics of selfishness and greed. But the problem is both parties are bought out. But this is Movie Guy Star Raisin. I've done enough for my rant on that. You have a nice day, and I will see you 25 billion years. I will.